When we're talking about rescue dog, we are talking about a dog with a different past, most of the cases, than a dog from a breeder. And this is something we have to consider. And I'm talking about breeders who are really very into showing their puppies the world and stuff like that. So really considerate breeders, okay? Not puppy mills and stuff like that. And the difference between the two, in short, is that sometimes we don't know the past of our rescue dogs. Sometimes they haven't learned anything that is existing in our world. Sometimes they have just learned very different skills, like when we adopt a street dog. And we have to consider that in our training efforts. And that's tip number one. Whenever we are training with a rescue dog, we should consider whatever we know about the past. Yes, very often we don't know anything or we don't know a lot, and it just becomes clearer when we are living with that dog for quite some time, because the dogs show specific behavior that give us a clue about what they could have experienced in their past. But it is a lot easier if we know what happened to that dog. So what we can do is, when we know it, kind of tailor the training to what the dog already knows and is already comfortable with, because we have a lot easier times training when the dog is comfortable with whatever we are doing, right? So, for example, if we have a dog that has lived in some kind of barn or backyard or whatever, so was mostly outdoors in some kind of fenced area, then it might be easier to start training outside. While when we are talking about training in general, we would often start inside because we don't have many distractions inside. Outside there are more distractions. But with a freshly adopted rescue dog, it could be that outside is more comfortable for the dog, and that's when starting outside is easier. It's just an example, it can be anything. And wherever we want to start with our dog, we have to be patient, and that's actually tip number 2. Be very patient. It again depends on what the history of that dog is, how old the dog is, what breed or mixes the dog is, and what he has experienced. But sometimes, depending on all of that, training takes longer than with a freshly adopted puppy from a breeder, right? Because the dog might be a little more cautious, or the dog might not trust humans at all, or we are making great progress, but then something happens that triggers a memory in the dog and we have setbacks. Of course, that can happen with any training. For example, if you're trained for leash reactivity and you have a dog that has learned to walk past another dog very nicely with a little bit of distance, and then you come across somebody who just lets their dog crash into yours and yours makes another bad experience and has to escalate again, then you will have setbacks as well. But for rescue dogs, especially rescue dogs with a difficult past, setbacks can be more severe. Also when we have a lot of health issues, and that's not more in rescue dogs, don't get me wrong. My clients are kind of equally diverted in rescue dogs or breeders. Yeah? So I have about 50-50. And health issues are among a lot of them. And it's not more in rescue dogs or more in purebred dogs. It's just sometimes they are there. But if we have a bad past and health issues, the setbacks just can be more severe. And that's when we have to be very, very patient, because it's extremely frustrating for us to just see great results and then they are just crushed. The thing is, when we already had results, we will get them back faster next time. So be patient. And when we're talking about the dog's past, something happens a lot, and that is that we have to see if the dog is comfortable with us giving him food. And that's where we get to tip number 3. See what your dog is motivated by. A lot of rescue dogs have made the experience to be lured and then caught, right? Because they were roaming around somewhere and some rescue organization just caught them and then brought them to a shelter. Oh well. And to be able to catch the dog, they lured the dog with food. And very often the dog sees this as an intense experience. Let's call it intense experience. For some dogs it's really traumatic. And that one single experience is enough to be very cautious around people who are offering food to them. And that's when training with food gets a really tricky kind of turn. So that's when we can start training the dog to accept food from us. And that's a whole training process in itself. All right? But there are other things that can be motivating for our dogs. And when we are trying to get a foot in the door with training, we should use whatever the dog likes to do. So, does he like to dig? Does he like to watch stuff? Wildlife, people, dogs, whatever. Does he like to play? Does he like to run with you? All of these things can be used as reinforcers and can be used for training. Of course, not in every situation, because if we are training a sit inside, we cannot use watching wildlife as a reinforcer. That's clear. But every dog is motivated by something. And yes, the more afraid a dog is, the harder it is to find out what the dog is motivated by. And when we have a really scared dog who is just hiding under something and not engaging with humans at all, then we can start using treats, but disconnected from the human. That's could look very different for every dog. So depending on what the dog can do, where the human can be while the dog does something, and all those things. So this is a whole thing in itself. But if you consider all of these 3 tips, training will be still very fast, depending, of course, again, on the dog's character. But whatever we want to train with our dogs, I would always recommend giving our freshly adopted rescue dog a period of time to just settle, to just get used to the new day-to-day life, and to relax and sleep. So we have to be a little quicker with puppies because socialization period is just limited. But for adult dogs, I like to just give them a few weeks of just calming down. no walks or very short walks, depending on if we have a yard or not. And yes, we can still start some tiny things inside, but other than that, I like to give them just time to adjust, because it takes a lot to change the complete life in every aspect. So it's very important not to overwhelm these dogs. Okay? So why don't you write me in the comments if this is something you're already doing or not, if you have a new rescue dog. And don't forget to like and subscribe. And if you need help with your new rescue dog, or with your rescue dog, doesn't have to be new, go to the description, book a free call, and we see how I can help you. I would love to meet you. I would love to chat about your dog and just help however I can. That's it. I wish you an amazing time with your rescue dog, a lot of fun training, and we'll see each other next time. Bye!